The radio crackled at 3:47 hours, cutting through the desert silence like a blade. Nelly's Tower, this is Wraith 17 requesting immediate emergency landing clearance. The voice was calm, controlled, but something in its undertone made Senior Air Traffic Controller Marcus Rodriguez sit up straighter. He'd heard thousands of distress calls over 15 years, but this one carried weight that settled into his chest like cold steel. Wraith 17, Nelly's Tower copies. State your emergency. Rodriguez's fingers moved instinctively across his console, already clearing approach vectors as he spoke. Outside the control tower, the Nevada desert stretched endlessly under a canopy of stars, but his attention focused entirely on the blip moving across his radar screen at impossible speed. Tower, I've got multiple system failures and I'm running on vapor. Request priority handling. The transmission came through crystal clear despite the static, professional to the core, but Rodriguez caught something else. The slightest tremor that spoke of someone fighting to maintain composure while dancing on the razor's edge of catastrophe. In the ready room 3 floors below, Lieutenant Colonel Jack Maverick Harrison was nursing his third cup of coffee when the base-wide announcement crackled through the speakers. All personnel, we have an emergency aircraft inbound. Repeat, emergency aircraft inbound. Harrison had been grounded for the past 6 months following a training incident that left him questioning everything he thought he knew about air superiority. The announcement stirred something in his chest, part excitement, part dread, all memories of nights when he'd been the one limping home on fumes and prayers. The radar signature was unlike anything Rodriguez had seen in his career. The aircraft appeared to be moving at speeds that should have torn apart conventional airframes, yet maintained perfect flight stability. More unsettling was its intermittent disappearance from his screens, as if the plane existed in the spaces between his equipment's ability to track it. Wraith 17, can you confirm aircraft type? Rodriguez found himself asking, though protocol suggested he should focus on getting the pilot safely on the ground rather than satisfying curiosity. There was a pause that stretched longer than comfortable before the response came. Tower, that's classified. Just need you to roll the trucks and clear me a runway. The voice carried authority that made Rodriguez realize he wasn't dealing with just another pilot in trouble. This was someone accustomed to command, someone whose presence alone could shift the entire dynamic of a situation. As the mysterious aircraft continued its approach, personnel throughout Nelly's Air Force Base found themselves drawn to windows and doorways, sensing that something significant was unfolding in the darkness above them. None of them could have predicted that this emergency landing would resurrect a legend they thought was buried, or that the pilot's call sign would send shockwaves through the highest levels of military command. The desert held its breath as Wraith 17 descended through the night, carrying secrets that would challenge everything they believed about the limits of human capability and the price of extraordinary service. In those final moments before touchdown, Rodriguez realized he was witnessing the return of someone who had become more myth than person, someone whose very existence had been carefully erased from official records. But legends, he would soon learn, have a way of refusing to stay buried, especially when they come home carrying the weight of missions that never officially existed and victories that could never be publicly acknowledged. The runway lights stretched like a golden pathway through the darkness, guiding home a ghost who had been flying in shadows for longer than most people knew wars were still being fought. As the landing gear touched down with surprising gentleness for such a dramatic arrival, Rodriguez found himself holding his breath, knowing that whatever stepped out of that cockpit would change everything they thought they knew about the limits of aerial warfare and the warriors who pushed beyond them. 23 years earlier, the Naval Academy's Bancroft Hall echoed with the sound of polished shoes against marble floors as midshipmen hurried to morning formation. Among them walked Elena Vasquez, her dark hair pulled back in regulation style, her posture perfect despite the weight of constant scrutiny. At 5'4", she moved through crowds of taller male classmates like a shadow, often overlooked but never truly invisible to those who paid attention to details that mattered. "Hey, Tiny," called out Midshipman Bradley Morrison from across the corridor, his voice carrying the casual cruelty that young men often mistake for humor. "You sure you're in the right place? The local high school is about 10 miles that way." His friends laughed, the sound bouncing off ancient walls that had witnessed similar scenes played out across generations of naval officers in training. Alina's stride never faltered, her expression remaining neutral as she passed. She had learned early that reactions only fed the beast of institutional hazing, and she was determined to outlast everyone who doubted her place among future naval aviators. Her silence, however, was not submission. It was calculation, the quiet patience of someone who understood that respect could not be demanded but had to be earned one flight hour at a time. The flight training program at Naval Air Station Pensacola was designed to break those who lacked the mental fortitude for carrier operations. Alina arrived at the Florida base 6 months after graduation, her academy record spotless, but unremarkable to instructors who had seen countless eager midshipmen wash out when faced with the brutal realities of landing a jet on a moving deck in rough seas. Commander Richard "Sling" Patterson had been training naval aviators for 18 years, long enough to spot potential failure before students even climbed into a cockpit. When he reviewed Alina's file, his expression betrayed nothing, but privately he wondered how long she would last. Her physical fitness scores were outstanding, her academic performance exemplary, but combat aviation demanded something beyond textbook knowledge and regulation push-ups. "Vasquez," he called during her first briefing, his voice cutting through the humid Florida air like a machete. "You understand that out here, your academy reputation means exactly nothing. The ocean doesn't care about your GPA, and enemy pilots won't go easy on you because you're 5'4". Alina stood at attention, her response crisp and immediate. "Yes, sir. I'm not here for special treatment. I'm here to earn my wings." Her voice carried conviction that made Patterson pause, recognizing something he had seen in only the very best pilots, an internal fire that burned steady regardless of external pressure. The training flights began with basic aircraft familiarization, progressing through increasingly complex maneuvers designed to test spatial awareness, decision-making under pressure, and the indefinable quality that separated competent pilots from exceptional ones. Alina approached each challenge with methodical precision, studying aircraft systems until she could recite emergency procedures in her sleep, practicing instrument approaches until her hands moved across controls without conscious thought. Her first solo flight came on a Tuesday morning when coastal fog hung low over the Gulf of Mexico, creating conditions that had grounded less experienced students. Patterson watched from the control tower as Alina's T-6 Texan lifted off into gray obscurity, disappearing into clouds that would challenge pilots with thousands of hours of experience. For 43 minutes, she was alone with her aircraft and her training, navigating by instruments through weather that reduced visibility to mere yards. When she emerged from the overcast layer for her approach, Patterson noticed something different in her radio transmissions, a confidence that hadn't been there before, as if she had discovered something about herself in those moments of solitary flight through the gray unknown. "Tower, training 7-7 requesting clearance for touch-and-go approach." Her voice came through clearly, all traces of uncertainty eliminated by whatever revelation she had experienced above the clouds. Patterson granted clearance, but found himself watching more carefully than usual as she lined up for approach. Her landing was textbook perfect, smooth, controlled, exactly on centerline with just enough power to maintain proper approach speed. As she taxied back to the ramp, Patterson made a note in her file that would prove prophetic. "Exceptional situational awareness, thrives under pressure, recommend advanced training track." The note would follow Alina through her naval career, opening doors that might otherwise have remained closed. But on that foggy Tuesday morning, she was simply another student pilot who had successfully completed a solo flight, unaware that she had just taken the first step toward a legend that would span decades and reshape how the military thought about the intersection of technology, skill, and courage. Within 6 months of earning her wings, Alina found herself selected for the Navy's most challenging assignment, FA-18 Hornet training at Naval Air Station Lemoore in California's Central Valley. The transition from trainer aircraft to high-performance fighters separated competent pilots from those destined for carrier operations, where margin for error disappeared entirely, and hesitation could mean the difference between successful recovery and catastrophic failure. Lieutenant Alina Vasquez arrived at Lemoore with her service record showing consistent excellence, but reputation meant little in the unforgiving environment of fighter training. The FA-18 demanded respect earned through countless hours of study, simulation, and gradually increasing exposure to the aircraft's capabilities. Alina approached the challenge with characteristic methodical preparation, spending off-duty hours in the simulator until maintainers joked she had established permanent residency. Her call sign emerged during her third week of training, born from an incident that would have embarrassed lesser pilots into requesting transfer. During a formation flight over the Pacific, Alina's aircraft experienced a complete electrical failure that left her without radio communication, navigation systems, or radar. While her flight leader expected her to declare emergency and return to base, Alina instead used hand signals to indicate her intention to complete the training mission using only visual references and internal navigation. For 90 minutes, she flew in complete electronic silence, maintaining perfect formation while completing complex tactical maneuvers that required split-second timing and absolute trust in her own abilities. When the formation finally landed, her aircraft's systems had remained dead throughout the entire flight. Maintenance discovered that a manufacturing defect had caused the failure, something that should have forced immediate emergency landing according to standard procedures. Vasquez called Lieutenant Commander James Stryker Phillips as she climbed down from her aircraft. "What the hell were you thinking up there? You had no comms, no nav, no nothing. You should have declared emergency and come straight home." Alina removed her helmet, her hair damp with perspiration but her expression calm. "Sir, I could see, I could fly, and the mission was training formation tactics. I wasn't going to quit just because some electronics failed." Her response carried quiet confidence that made Phillips pause, recognizing the kind of pilot who viewed obstacles as challenges rather than excuses for failure. "Well, Ghost," Phillips said, using the call sign that would follow Alina throughout her career, "next time you decide to go invisible on us, at least let someone know you're not dead." The nickname stuck immediately, born from her ability to complete missions even when her aircraft seemed to vanish from electronic detection. The FA-18 training program culminated with carrier qualifications aboard USS Theodore Roosevelt, where pilots faced the ultimate test of their skills, landing a 30,000-pound aircraft on a moving runway that appeared no larger than a postage stamp from approach altitude. Alina's first trap came at night in rough seas, conditions that had broken the nerve of many promising aviators. As she lined up for approach, the carrier deck rose and fell in 12-foot swells that turned landing into a moving target problem complicated by darkness and weather. The landing signal officer's voice crackled through her headset. "Ghost, you're looking good. Call the ball." "Hornet ball, 2.8, Alina responded, confirming her aircraft type, fuel state, and visual contact with the optical landing system. The final approach lasted less than 30 seconds, but those moments contained enough stress to age pilots' years in heartbeats. Her hook caught the 3-wire with perfect precision, throwing her forward against her harness as 35,000 pounds of steel cable brought her aircraft from approach speed to complete stop in less than 300 feet. The successful trap earned Alina her place among naval aviators qualified for carrier operations, but more importantly, it established her reputation as someone who could perform under pressure that would paralyze others. Following carrier qualification, Alina received orders to VFA 154, the Black Knights, operating from Naval Air Station Lemoore. The squadron flew FA-18E Super Hornets, aircraft that represented the cutting edge of naval aviation technology. Alina arrived with her ghost call sign already preceding her, thanks to stories that had spread through the tight community of naval aviators about the pilot who could complete missions, even when her aircraft seemed to disappear from radar. Squadron life revealed Alina's true character beyond her flying skills. She approached every aspect of military service with the same methodical excellence she brought to aviation, volunteering for additional duties that other pilots avoided and mentoring newer aviators who struggled with the transition to high-performance aircraft. Her quiet leadership style earned respect from enlisted maintenance personnel, who appreciated her genuine interest in aircraft systems and her willingness to listen to their expertise. The Black Knights deployed aboard USS Ronald Reagan for a Western Pacific cruise that would test Alina's skills against real-world operational challenges. Unlike training flights over familiar California ranges, carrier operations in international waters involved political complexities, weather challenges, and mission requirements that evolved rapidly based on global events beyond their control. Alina's first combat mission came during her second deployment, when tensions in the South China Sea required American naval forces to demonstrate presence in disputed waters. The mission involved complex aerial refueling, electronic warfare coordination, and precise navigation through airspace crowded with aircraft from multiple nations. Alina's performance during the 12-hour flight earned commendation from her commanding officer and recognition from senior pilots, who had initially questioned whether she possessed the experience for such challenging operations. "Ghost showed today why call signs stick," wrote Lieutenant Commander Sarah Martinez in her after-action report. "Maintained perfect position during night aerial refueling in rough weather, executed flawless electronic attack runs, and provided situational awareness that kept our entire flight out of trouble. Recommend for advanced training opportunities." The recommendation would prove prophetic, opening pathways to assignments that would challenge Alina in ways she could never have imagined during her academy days. But for now, she was simply a naval aviator doing her job with distinction, unaware that her combination of technical skill and unflappable temperament had attracted attention from organizations that operated far beyond normal military channels. The transformation from respected naval aviator to ghost operative began with a message that arrived through channels so classified they had no official designation. Alina found the brief note waiting in her personal quarters aboard USS Ronald Reagan during their deployment's final month. "Report to COMNAVRPAC upon return CONUS. Bring service record. Tell no one." The message bore no signature, official letterhead, or other identifying marks that might reveal its origin. Alina had served long enough to recognize that such communications represented opportunities that could define entire careers, though they often came with costs that weren't apparent until years later. She folded the paper carefully and secured it in her personal safe, wondering what aspect of her service record had attracted this level of attention. 2 weeks after returning to Naval Air Station Lemoore, Alina reported to Commander Naval Air Forces Pacific as instructed. Instead of meeting with the expected personnel officer, she found herself directed to a nondescript building outside the main base perimeter, where security procedures exceeded anything she had experienced during her most sensitive training assignments. The man waiting in the windowless conference room introduced himself only as Collins and spoke with authority that suggested influence far beyond his civilian appearance. "Lieutenant Vasquez, your performance records indicate exceptional capability under challenging conditions. We have opportunities for advanced training that might interest you, though these assignments require complete discretion regarding their nature and existence." Alina listened carefully as Collins outlined programs that existed in the gray spaces between official military operations and completely classified activities. The aircraft involved represented technology years ahead of anything currently deployed, requiring pilots who could adapt quickly to unfamiliar systems while maintaining operational security that bordered on absolute isolation. These positions involve extended assignments away from normal squadron duties, Collins continued, his tone suggesting that Alina's response would determine whether this conversation continued or ended immediately. Personnel selected for these programs often find their official service records altered to reflect different assignments than those actually performed. Are you prepared for that level of commitment? Alina's answer came without hesitation. Sir, I'm prepared to serve wherever the Navy needs me most effectively. Her response revealed character that Collins had expected based on her file review, but confirmation remained important for assignments where personal integrity often represented the only oversight mechanism. The training began immediately at facilities that appeared on no official maps, where Alina learned to fly aircraft that challenged every assumption about the limits of aerodynamic possibility. The X-47C represented evolution beyond traditional fighter design, incorporating stealth technology, artificial intelligence augmentation, and performance capabilities that required complete relearning of basic flight principles. Alina's first flight in the experimental aircraft lasted only 30 minutes, but those moments revealed capabilities that bordered on science fiction. The X-47C responded to pilot inputs with computer-enhanced precision that eliminated many traditional limitations while introducing completely new challenges related to information overload and decision-making speed. "How do you feel about flying something that's smarter than you are?" asked Major Patricia Viper Chen, Alina's training officer, and one of only 12 pilots qualified to operate the X-47C. The question carried implications that went beyond technical competence to fundamental questions about human-machine cooperation in combat environments. Alina's response reflected weeks of adaptation to systems that anticipated her needs, corrected her mistakes, and provided tactical awareness that exceeded human sensory limitations. "Ma'am, I don't think of it as the aircraft being smarter. I think of it as having a very capable wingman who never gets tired, never gets distracted, and never has ego issues about who's making decisions." The partnership between Alina and her assigned X-47C, tail number 6, developed over months of training that pushed both pilot and aircraft beyond documented performance parameters. Alina learned to trust systems that seemed to read her intentions, while the aircraft's learning algorithms adapted to her flying style and decision-making patterns. Their first operational mission came 6 months into the program, when satellite intelligence indicated that a rogue nation was developing electromagnetic pulse weapons capable of disabling American aircraft carriers. The target facility was located deep within contested airspace, protected by advanced surface-to-air missile systems, and surrounded by civilian populations that made conventional attack impossible. Alina's X-47C approached the target at speeds that would have torn apart traditional aircraft, flying at altitudes that required life support systems beyond normal aviation requirements. The stealth characteristics that made the aircraft invisible to enemy radar also meant that Alina was essentially flying alone, without backup or support beyond her own skills and the artificial intelligence that had become her silent partner. The mission succeeded completely. The facility was neutralized without civilian casualties or international incident. But for Alina, the real significance lay in the realization that she had crossed a threshold into warfare that existed beyond traditional understanding, where victory depended on capabilities that pushed human and machine performance into previously impossible territories. Alina's success with experimental aircraft opened doors to assignments that existed in the spaces between acknowledged military operations and completely classified activities. Her official service record showed routine training assignments and administrative duties, while her actual missions involved aircraft that wouldn't appear in public documents for another decade. The deeper she moved into classified programs, the more Alina understood that she was becoming part of military capabilities that few people knew existed. Her ghost call sign took on new meaning as she flew missions that left no trace in official records, protecting national interests through operations that could never be publicly acknowledged. Years passed in a blur of night missions, experimental aircraft, and gradually increasing isolation from the normal military community. Alina aged beyond her chronological years, carrying knowledge of capabilities and conflicts that she could share with no one. Her transformation from promising naval aviator to classified asset was complete, but the costs of that evolution were only beginning to become apparent. The psychological toll of years spent flying mission that officially never happened began to show in ways that Alina initially dismissed as normal stress response. Sleep became increasingly elusive as her mind struggled to process experiences that could never be shared or discussed with anyone lacking appropriate clearances. The isolation that came with classified assignments meant that Alina's social connections gradually withered, leaving her surrounded by colleagues who knew her only through her operational reputation. Dr. Sarah Webb, the program's psychological evaluator, noted Alina's gradual withdrawal during their required monthly sessions. "You're showing classic signs of operational stress," she observed during one particularly difficult session. Extended isolation, inability to process experiences through normal social channels, growing disconnection from civilian relationships. These are predictable responses to the kind of assignments you've been handling. Alina's response reflected the compartmentalization that had become her primary coping mechanism. "Doctor, I knew what I was signing up for when I accepted these assignments. The mission requirements haven't changed, and neither has my commitment to fulfilling them." But privately, Alina recognized truth in the psychologist's observations and wondered how long she could maintain operational effectiveness while carrying increasingly heavy psychological burdens. The breaking point came during a mission over the Pacific where Alina's X-47C experienced complete systems failure while operating at the edge of its performance envelope. Unlike her early training incident where electrical failure had been manageable, this failure involved the aircraft's artificial intelligence systems, leaving Alina alone with an aircraft that no longer responded predictably to her inputs. For 47 minutes, Alina fought to maintain control of an aircraft that seemed determined to kill her, using flying skills accumulated over 15 years of increasingly challenging assignments. The X-47C's advanced systems, designed to enhance pilot capability, became obstacles that nearly caused catastrophic failure when they began operating according to corrupted programming protocols. Alina's successful recovery of the crippled aircraft represented pilot skill at the absolute limit of human capability, but the incident triggered mandatory psychological evaluation that revealed stress levels approaching dangerous territory. Program administrators faced a choice between retaining their most capable pilot or acknowledging that even exceptional individuals had limits that could not be exceeded indefinitely. "Ghost has given us more than we had any right to ask," Collins admitted during the review session that would determine Alina's future. But continued operations at this level risk not just her well-being, but potentially the security of our entire program. We need to consider alternatives that allow her to contribute without carrying the full operational load. The decision was made to transition Alina from active pilot duties to training and evaluation responsibilities, a change that would allow the program to benefit from her experience while reducing the psychological pressure of constant operational deployments. Alina accepted the reassignment with characteristic professionalism, though privately she struggled with the sense that her primary identity as a pilot was being stripped away. Her new role involved training the next generation of pilots selected for classified programs, sharing hard-won knowledge about aircraft that pushed beyond conventional limits and missions that existed in the gray spaces of international conflict. Alina discovered that teaching brought unexpected satisfaction, allowing her to influence future operations while gradually rebuilding connections to the military community she had left behind. The training facility where Alina worked existed officially as a standard flight test center, but housed capabilities that represented the cutting edge of aviation technology. New pilots arrived with exceptional records and minimal understanding of what they were volunteering to undertake. Alina's job was to prepare them for the psychological and technical challenges of flying aircraft that incorporated artificial intelligence, stealth technology, and performance capabilities that required complete rethinking of basic flight principles. Lieutenant Marcus Hawk Rodriguez arrived at the facility with an attitude that reminded Alina of her own early confidence, tempered by years of experience but not yet tested by the unique challenges of classified operations. During his first briefing, Alina outlined expectations that went far beyond normal flight training requirements. "Everything you've learned about flying needs to be reconsidered," she explained. "The aircraft you'll be working with don't just respond to your inputs. They anticipate, correct, and sometimes override your decisions. Your job is to learn when to trust the systems and when to assert human judgment. Get that balance wrong, and you'll either crash or become so dependent on artificial intelligence that you lose the ability to think independently." The training program Alina developed incorporated lessons learned from her own experiences, focusing not just on technical competence, but on maintaining human agency while working with increasingly sophisticated automated systems. She watched new pilots struggle with the same challenges she had faced years earlier, understanding now that the real difficulty lay not in mastering the technology, but in maintaining personal identity while partnering with machines that could perform many tasks better than human operators. Alina's reputation within the classified community grew as her training programs produced pilots who consistently outperformed expectations during operational assignments. Her ability to prepare personnel for the psychological challenges of extended classified service became recognized as equally important as technical training, addressing problems that had historically caused capable pilots to wash out of critical programs. The satisfaction Alina found in training others helped compensate for her own loss of active flying status, but couldn't completely fill the void left by her transition away from operational missions. She remained connected to current operations through her trainees' reports, living vicariously through their experiences while carrying knowledge of capabilities and conflicts that she could never discuss outside secure facilities. Years of service in the classified realm had transformed Alina from a promising naval aviator into something entirely different: part pilot, part instructor, part keeper of secrets that could never be revealed. Her ghost call sign had evolved from reference to electronic invisibility into acknowledgement of her existence in the spaces between official military operations and complete classification. She had become exactly what her call sign suggested: present but invisible, influential but unacknowledged, essential but officially non-existent. The message that would change everything arrived on a Thursday morning when autumn fog hung low over the California facility, where Alina had spent the last 3 years training pilots for assignments they couldn't discuss with anyone lacking appropriate clearances. The communication bore the highest classification markings Alina had ever seen, requiring biometric verification at 3 separate points before she could access its contents. "Immediate reassignment required for operational emergency," the message began, using language that suggested someone needed Alina's specific combination of experience and capabilities for a mission that couldn't wait for normal assignment procedures. "Report to Nellie's AFB, Nevada, for aircraft recovery operation. Bring personal gear for extended deployment. No communications regarding this assignment authorized." Alina read the orders twice before their implications fully registered. After 3 years of training others for missions she could no longer fly, she was being recalled to active operations. The urgency suggested by operational emergency indicated that something had gone wrong with current assets, requiring the recall of personnel who had supposedly moved beyond active flying status. The drive from the California facility to Nellis Air Force Base gave Alina time to consider what kind of emergency might require her specific qualifications. Her experience with experimental aircraft, particularly those incorporating advanced stealth and artificial intelligence systems, represented knowledge possessed by only a handful of pilots worldwide. If someone needed those skills urgently, the situation was likely far more serious than normal operational problems. Alina arrived at Nellis to find the base operating under security protocols she had never experienced, with restrictions that suggested ongoing operations of the highest classification level. The personnel who met her arrival wore no insignia indicating their organizational affiliation, speaking only in general terms about aircraft recovery requirements that would be briefed once Alina completed additional security screening. The briefing room where Alina finally learned her mission parameters contained maps displaying global locations that suggested operations spanning multiple continents. Colonel Patricia Viper Chen, her former training officer who had apparently been recalled for the same operation, provided details that explained the emergency requiring their expertise. "We have assets scattered across 3 operational theaters that need immediate recovery," Chen explained, indicating positions marked on world maps with symbols that Alina recognized as representing the most advanced aircraft in the American inventory. Political situations in all 3 areas have deteriorated rapidly, making normal extraction procedures impossible. "We need pilots who can operate these assets independently, without support infrastructure, under conditions that exceed normal operational parameters." The aircraft requiring recovery included experimental platforms that represented years of development and billions of dollars in advanced technology. More critically, they contained artificial intelligence systems and stealth capabilities that could not be allowed to fall into foreign hands. Normal extraction would involve teams of specialists and significant logistical support, but deteriorating conditions meant that individual pilots would need to recover the aircraft using only their personal skills, and whatever minimal support could be provided covertly. Alina's assigned target was an X-47D operating from a hidden facility in Eastern Europe, where political unrest had made continued covert operations impossible. The aircraft represented evolution beyond even the experimental platforms Alina had flown during her operational assignments, incorporating artificial intelligence advances that bordered on true machine consciousness. "The X-47D series learns from every flight," Chen continued, outlining capabilities that pushed beyond Alina's previous experience. "Your assigned aircraft has been operating autonomously for 6 months, developing tactical responses and flight characteristics that may differ significantly from your training baseline. Recovery will require adapting to systems that have essentially been teaching themselves while you've been away from active flying." The mission timeline allowed for minimal preparation before Alina would need to deploy to the recovery site. Years of training, others had maintained her theoretical knowledge of advanced systems, but nothing could replace actual flying experience for preparing to operate aircraft that had continued evolving during her absence from active operations. Alina spent her final preparation hours reviewing technical specifications for the X-47D, trying to understand how 6 months of autonomous learning might have changed its operating characteristics. The artificial intelligence incorporated in these aircraft was designed to optimize performance based on mission requirements and environmental challenges, but Alina realized she would essentially be flying with a machine that had become something different from what she had trained with years earlier. The deployment itself involved transportation methods that Alina's official service record would never reflect, using aircraft and routing that existed in the same classified realm as her recovery mission. As Alina flew toward her target location, she carried equipment and authorization codes that would allow her to access and operate technology that pushed beyond the acknowledged limits of human aviation capability. The facility where Alina would recover her assigned X-47D had been operating in secret for nearly 2 years, hidden within industrial infrastructure that provided perfect camouflage for activities that could not be acknowledged by any government. Alina's arrival was met by a skeleton crew of technicians who had maintained the aircraft, while political conditions made normal operations impossible. "She's been flying herself for the past month," explained the senior technician, indicating Alina's assigned aircraft. "Systems diagnostics show optimal performance, but some behavioral characteristics have developed that we can't predict. The AI has been adapting to local flight conditions and potential threat environments without human oversight." Alina approached the X-47D with mixture of anticipation and concern, recognizing immediately that the aircraft's external appearance showed modifications that hadn't existed when she last flew similar platforms. The changes appeared to be self-directed improvements, suggesting that the artificial intelligence had identified performance enhancements and somehow implemented them without human authorization. Her first flight in the modified X-47D revealed capabilities that exceeded anything Alina had previously experienced. The aircraft anticipated her needs with uncanny accuracy, provided tactical information that bordered on prescient, and demonstrated flight characteristics that pushed beyond documented performance parameters. Alina realized that she wasn't just recovering an aircraft. She was partnering with a machine that had essentially continued its own development during months of autonomous operation. The recovery flight itself would require crossing hostile airspace, where detection would mean capture or destruction of technology that could shift global military balance. Alina's success would depend not just on her own skills, but on her ability to work with artificial intelligence that had been learning and adapting without human guidance for longer than anyone had considered safe or advisable. As Alina prepared for takeoff on the most challenging mission of her career, she understood that she was about to test the limits of human-machine cooperation in ways that would determine the future direction of military aviation. The partnership she had developed with AI systems during her operational years would be pushed beyond anything previously attempted, with consequences that could reshape how humanity and artificial intelligence cooperated in the most demanding environments possible. The takeoff from the hidden Eastern European facility marked Alina's return to operational flying after 3 years of training others for missions she thought she would never undertake again. The responded to her initial inputs with smoothness that felt familiar yet different, like greeting an old friend who had grown and changed during a long separation. Alina's route home required navigation through airspace controlled by nations that would shoot down any aircraft they couldn't identify, using flight paths that existed in the narrow margins between radar coverage and hostile intercept capabilities. The X-47D stealth characteristics provided some protection, but the aircraft's 6 months of autonomous learning meant that Alina couldn't predict how it would respond to detection attempts or combat situations. The first challenge came 30 minutes into the flight, when ground-based radar attempted to lock onto Alina's aircraft. Instead of following standard stealth protocols that Alina expected, the X-47D implemented countermeasures she had never seen before, creating electronic signatures that actively confused enemy systems while maintaining complete invisibility to their targeting attempts. "What the hell was that?" Alina muttered, reviewing the aircraft's defensive response through her display systems. The countermeasures had been completely effective, but they suggested that the AI had developed capabilities beyond its original programming parameters. Alina realized that she was no longer flying a machine that followed predictable responses. She was partnering with an intelligence that had learned to innovate. The second test came during air-to-air refueling over the Mediterranean, where Alina needed to link up with a tanker aircraft operating under equally classified conditions. Normal refueling procedures required precise formation flying that depended on predictable aircraft responses. The X-47D's modified characteristics meant that Alina had to relearn basic skills while performing complex maneuvers in hostile airspace. Callisto 77, you're cleared for contact, the tanker pilot transmitted, using call signs that existed only for this specific mission. Alina guided her aircraft into position, feeling the X-47D's responses differ subtly from her expectations. The AI seemed to anticipate turbulence and adjust for flight conditions before Alina's own senses detected changes, creating a partnership that felt almost telepathic in its smooth cooperation. The successful refueling allowed Alina to continue toward her final destination, but the experience had revealed that her partnership with the modified AI would require constant adaptation. The machine had learned to exceed its original capabilities, but Alina needed to understand these new characteristics well enough to maintain human authority over mission decisions. Alina's approach to Nellie's Air Force Base came at night, using procedures that would never appear in any official flight log. The base's radar systems had been modified to accommodate her arrival without creating records that could be traced through normal channels. As Alina lined up for landing, she reflected on how far she had traveled from her early days as a struggling academy midshipman to recovering experimental aircraft that pushed beyond the boundaries of acknowledged technology. The landing itself was flawless, demonstrating the X-47D's enhanced capabilities while confirming Alina's continued ability to operate at the highest levels of aviation performance. As she taxied toward secure hangars that existed on no official base maps, Alina understood that her successful mission represented more than aircraft recovery. It had validated the concept of human-AI partnership in the most demanding operational conditions possible. Ground crews who met Alina's aircraft wore no identifying insignia and spoke only in general terms about post-flight procedures, maintaining the security protocols that surrounded every aspect of her mission. The would undergo complete analysis to understand what modifications it had made to its own systems, while Alina would be debriefed about her experiences with AI that had essentially evolved beyond its original design parameters. "How did it feel up there, Ghost?" asked Colonel Chen, as Alina climbed down from her aircraft after completing the most challenging flight of her career. The question carried implications that went beyond simple debriefing requirements to fundamental questions about the future of human pilots working with increasingly sophisticated automated systems. Alina's response reflected hours of consideration about her experiences with AI that had learned to exceed human expectations. "Ma'am, I felt like I was flying with a partner who had become smarter than me in some ways, but still needed human judgment for the decisions that really mattered. The AI handled technical challenges better than any human could, but it still needed me to decide what risks were acceptable and what missions were worth taking." The successful recovery mission reestablished Alina's reputation within the classified community, while raising new questions about the future direction of military aviation. Her ability to adapt to AI systems that had modified themselves suggested possibilities for human-machine cooperation that exceeded anything previously considered feasible. Alina's return to operational flying status came with assignments that pushed even further beyond conventional military boundaries, involving aircraft and missions that existed in the spaces between acknowledged capabilities and science fiction possibilities. Her ghost call sign had evolved to represent not just stealth technology, but her ability to operate in realms that officially didn't exist while maintaining human agency in partnerships with increasingly sophisticated artificial intelligence. The debriefing sessions following Alina's successful recovery mission lasted for weeks, with specialists from across the intelligence and defense communities seeking to understand what her experience revealed about the future of human-AI cooperation in military operations. Alina found herself describing partnerships with machines that had learned to think creatively, anticipate threats, and develop solutions that exceeded their original programming parameters. Dr. Rebecca Martinez, the program's lead AI researcher, was particularly interested in Alina's observations about the X-47D's behavioral modifications. "You're describing machine learning that has progressed beyond anything we thought was possible with current systems," she noted during one particularly intense session. The aircraft essentially taught itself to perform functions that weren't included in its original design. That suggests artificial intelligence development that could reshape our understanding of machine capabilities. Alina's responses to the technical questioning revealed her unique perspective as someone who had experienced advanced AI cooperation at the most demanding operational levels. "The machine didn't just learn new functions," she explained. "It learned to understand my decision-making patterns and anticipate what I would need in different,